Hi, I'm Cory Ballis. Welcome to the Halloween edition of Artful TV.
Hello and welcome everyone to Artful TV, another episode where I am your host, Aileen Imperatrice, along with my co-host, Hal Raines. And today we are very, very lucky to have our guest artist as Cory Ballis.
Hello.
Welcome everybody. And it should be a great show. We're going to talk about art with artists. So let's first go over to Hal and see what he's doing on the pottery wheel. Hal?
Thank you. Okay, thanks. Basically, what I've done this week, and I've had some people question me about how I actually make fluted rims, lips, whatever you want to call it. Okay, as you're seeing, basically, I'm kind of assuming that everybody knows how to throw ball play. Doesn't necessarily mean they do, but I started with 5 pounds here, got quite a bit of width and a height out of it. And people have asked me how to split a rim. So that's really the whole focus of this video this time. So, just basically stretching the walls out, pulling them up, and cleaning out the bottom. So then I love different underglazes. And if you've seen my work, you know that most everything I do is colored with underglazes. I like glazes themselves, but the underglazes I find to be more interesting. And of course, the more you put on, the darker it's going to be, So anyway, so there we go. I'm using a rib at this point. You can see it's starting to split the rib wide open. And go to the depth that you really prefer, because you only get a few shots to do it. And then I add the color to contrast to complement. This one is a contrast color, which is going to be the red. And it will be bright ruby red when it's fired. I don't clean everything up until it gets almost bone dry. So that way the pinches that I put in it and the folds I put, are just going to leave. They'll still be there when it gets almost dry. And at that point I used, a bison tool from Bison Industries. You can get them on Etsy, but they're kind of pricey. So if you drop a Phil Bison tool, you're going to regret it, because they are expensive and they do break because they're carbide. So you can see there, I use a rib again just to get the little folds in them to clean the inside off. And at that point, I start using white to complement, to really contrast against those folds. And again, those spikes, I don't cut those spikes off until it's almost completely dry. We're talking bone dry, where you can sand. And that's when I use the bison tool first, and then just kind of smooth it out later. So, and I like to layer them. It's kind of like, you'll see with Cory, obviously his is glass, mine's clay, but the picking up the colors as you go along the way is a similar technique that he uses. And man, I love his work. So there you go. That's kind of what they look like, except again, they're smoother. So there you go.
Amazing.
Thank you.
So now each of the pieces you're working on, you're planning ahead of time what you're wanting to make those look like, but do you ever, as you're working on something, change your mind and then decide you want to do something different with it?
Oh, right, yeah. In fact, even as I was working with that piece, my thoughts later on that evening were to get back to it and then use a wiggle wire. So you can actually do some really more interesting, I'm getting off to the side there, some more interesting kind of techniques with it, where instead of just having the folds and how they form like a little open mouth, that are red, you can actually take a wire that looks like a spring and you just drag it through randomly. And it gives you a very interesting lip And as you turn the wheel one way, it pulls the lips one way, and then you reverse the wheel, go counterclockwise, and stretch the outside, and so it really exaggerates that look of those folded and pierced lips. It's just beautiful. But I ran out of time, and family needs, so you know how that goes. You just take care of what you have to do. So
Right.
that's all.
I wonder if Cory had any questions for you. I didn't want to shut him out if he had any questions specifically to Hal.
Oh no, I really like how you do that lip technique though. I was wondering how you got those, like they look like little pockets in the lip, and it's totally different than what I was expecting. I wasn't sure how you did it, but it was different than I expected.
Well, that's what I thought when I went to see you. So I can't wait to get into yours. So Aileen, let's go ahead and take a look at your work, and then we'll go right to Cory.
All right. Well, first I should say something. You may notice that I'm dressed a little differently today, and even Hal has a little bow tie on. We're celebrating Halloween this month, and so we wanted to have some fun with some things that we're wearing as costumes. So normally I don't dress with ears on my head, but anyway, we're just having fun today. But so for my segment, I wanted to show you some more of my artwork on canvas, and we've got 5 pieces we're looking at, with one with an extra detail. The first one here is called Basic Anatomy, and it was a piece that I did when I was really focusing on the frailty again of our human bodies, and just how it all comes down to all of us being skeletons underneath it all. The thing is, when you look very closely in the center there is a skull that's resting on top of the brown section, and it's kind of reminiscent of just the basic framework of the human being, and that's really what we are. And so when you go through life, you realize that there's a lot of people that choose to try to separate each other from the others in ways that are not complementary. But when we go back down to who we are as basic human beings, we're all just skeletons inside. We're all the same human beings, and that's why we need to remember that as we go forward and how we treat each other, that we're all fellow human beings. So that was something that I wanted to really share in this piece. And of course, in this time of October, we're kind of looking at the idea of Halloween and the imagery that we usually see here. And so with this, I chose to show pieces today that have some of that imagery that is very familiar to a lot of things that we think of during the Halloween month. So that's why there's a skull in this particular painting. And then the rubbing of white paint over it just kind of gives it a more eerie feeling that, you know, there's something that different layers to people, and we have a fog of what we are going through in the time, and all of that combined makes the imagery the way it is. So now the next piece you'll see is called Hiding Places. And again, playing with the skull imagery. Now in this, you probably can't see because it's so little down below, but on the bottom area where it's all green, which is the grassy area, all underneath the ground are a bunch of little skulls. And again, it's playing on that idea of how things that we have in our own past and things that we've hidden. This particular piece, the red house at the top, comes from a person that I've thought of in particular when I was working on this piece, and the way that they kind of tried to hide who they really were. They would use a facade to make them look like they were this person that they wanted to be in front of everyone, but then they had a lot of skeletons in their closet and things that they hid underground. And that's why I chose to put the little skeleton heads underneath the grass area, and just kind of reminiscent of that, where people are trying to hide things that they think that others will not accept of them. So it's working with that, but then, you know, we've got the blue sky around it, so it's still the facade of trying to be everything wonderful. It's something that, you know, I think a lot of people do when they're doing art, to try to be a therapeutic thing as well. And you kind of work through issues that you have with yourself and even with other people, and trying to come to some terms with that so you can move forward. So the next piece now. Oh, you have a question?
Before you go on. Yeah. Before you go on, the red house up in this, you know, that you have way in the sky above the skulls, is that an indicator of, you know, how of the way you perceive families often see themselves, like far above the, you know, the skeletons in the closet, as they say, that they just bury things so deeply it's not even discussed?
It's
Because I
interesting,
think
but
we have,
go ahead.
I just think that so often that, things that happen in families, bad things, like incest or whatever. I mean, those things are not discussed. It's just kind of so taboo that it just never gets addressed.
Right. Now, see, and again, I was doing this piece in particular with one person in mind, and they had their own things that they were hiding. But certainly it is a universal thought. And I think you're very correct in that.
Right.
And it's funny, I love to hear what other people see when they look at my work, because it may not have been what I specifically thought of as I was going through it myself, but it certainly speaks to the universality of art, which red always represents something that people use as power, use as a way of
Right.
coming across as being strong. And so that kind of a situation, yeah, there are definitely situations where people try to hide things and then, hide it under a veil of being a perfect little thing, a person or family or whatever, and then come to find out there's things that they're hiding. So, yep, that's the whole idea between hiding places.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
now the next piece we have is called New Life is Waiting. And on the far right of the side of the painting, you can see there are some balloons that are rising above a tree. And in those balloons, again, are some little faces, some little skull faces. And then hanging from the tree, there's also a chair. And then there's another very tall, lengthy chair image on the other side of the painting. And then there's another tree buried back on the other left side. So there's a lot of layers that I have put up on here. And there's even some other blocks of color. The idea of New Life is Waiting is that we are constantly evolving as human beings, and each thing that we think is holding us down or keeping us grounded, or perhaps keeping us from growing forward, are things that we have to work through and things that we have to acknowledge, and so that we can move on with our lives. And so we've got those things in our past that we remember and hold on to, but we try not to let it go so far as to keep us from that new life that we could have if we are able to evolve as human beings. So again, I really enjoy being able to play with some of these images that maybe people are a little afraid of at different times, but for me, it's a way through. It's a interesting way to look at our own psyche and try to figure out what those things mean to us personally. And again, just like with your comment from the last painting, depending on what a person sees when they look at it themselves is their own experience that they're bringing to it. And I really appreciate when people give me feedback, because then it's something that I know speaks to people universally. And it's not just what I intended, but then it can be something much more than that.
Right.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one. This one's called Reality Sets In. And this one had a wonderful origin in that there was a picture that a friend of mine who we know is a national poet laureate for 2 years in a row, our homegrown Juan Felipe Herrera, who is a wonderful poet and writer. And he had put a piece online on Facebook that was a photo of the light streaming through a orange juicer that was like a glass orange juicer. And I just thought it was such a remarkable image that I talked to him about it and said, can I use that image in what I'm working on with the art? He said, absolutely. And so this particular piece, the circular image that you see, the shape that's on the right side, comes from that. And there were actually spokes and lines that go in with that. And it kind of was reminiscent of that image of that juicer. But the other things that I did with this painting, again, was playing with so many layers. I really wanted to go into, again, the psyche of the human mind. And so using the image of the person floating with weights still attached to him, with other rubbing of paint on top of imagery, making various layers, and then with the little pieces of fabric actually attached to the painting as well. It's a lot of the mixed media that I enjoy working with, creates so many textures and gives you a more abstract feel that allows people to really envision what they want and when they look at the piece. So something that's coming out of my own mind fluidly and my own dreams, but then can become something else completely to whatever the people see it when they look at it themselves. So that's reality sets in.
Yeah.
Now this final piece, and there's going to be 2 images that you'll see here, but this first one is how you see it as a normal viewer. It's called Torn. It is a rather large painting that's set back inside of a wooden box that was constructed by my husband, Tony. And then I have a rod at the top that from it hangs a gauzy veil over the entire image. This piece is directly related to an unfortunate situation that happened to me when I was very young, and then growing up. I had a particular person that sexually harassed me through most of my life. And it was a very difficult thing for me to deal with personally. It took many, many years once I was an adult as an artist that I figured I needed to do something to represent that so I could let go of it. Because for me, my art has always been therapeutic and cathartic. I'm able to take something that's roaming around in my brain and maybe compelling me to want to create something. And then once I do it, I can let go of that. And it's all about putting the emotion into the work. So this piece is really about letting go of that anger, letting go of all of that control that this person had over me. Thankfully, they're no longer on the face of the earth. They passed several years ago, so they're no longer an immediate threat. But of course, you know, the damage that was done, I had to deal with. And this is one of the ways that I deal with it, is by putting it into art and just letting it go. So this first piece is just as you see it, a normal view. And then the next piece you'll see what I've done is taken my hand and removed the veil a bit so you can actually see the chair that's behind there. It's a very bright, deep red, like a blood red. And the chair itself is a very Gothic chair. It's very reminiscent of the types of chairs that you'd have in a church or in a throne situation where it's very stately looking. And again, that was more about representing the authority that this person had over me when they took advantage of me. And so it's a situation where I'm representing that person, but then putting them behind a veil, because for 2 reasons. For my own health, my own mental health, of course, we kind of compartmentalize things that happen to us throughout our lives to be able to move forward. And so behind a veil, that's like it's in the recesses of my mind and not bothering me so much anymore. It's just kind of part of the memories that I have. And then the other part is that at the time when it happened, I, of course, told the nearest adults that were available, and they told me, oh, you must be mistaken. Just let it go. You're wrong. And so at that moment, it clicked in my brain that, oh, wow, I have to take care of myself. And so they were telling me to put it behind a veil, in other words.
Just hide it.
Yeah. So it's, it's you know, it's those kinds of things that you have to deal with, and you just kind of work with them. But thank goodness we have art, at least for artists, that we can use that and let go of those things that bug us and work through them therapeutically, and then just be able to release them out. And I can tell you, when I did that piece, that torn piece, it was a part of a series that was the first time I really was extremely personal in all the work that went into that series. And they were called self-portraits, and every single piece was a different chair. And when I presented them in a gallery the first time and people came through and looked at them, I had such a huge amount of people telling me their own personal stories with each piece. They would come and tell me things that they probably not told anyone else, and really shared some very personal things. I was just so amazed by, and I realized at that moment that, yeah, that's what I have to do. I have to keep being willing to share very personal things, because it resonates with others and helps them confront what they're dealing with too.
But boy, it's beautiful. And so that being said, everybody, this is Cory Ballis from Ballis Glass. And one of the friendliest people I've had the chance to interview. Just a really great guy, lots of smiles, lots of energy. And he's got a sweet dog too. I mean, you know, what else can you have?
Yeah, she's famous now. She was on the news yesterday, so she's famous. Yeah.
Good.
Everyone was worried about her.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at your video.
All
and
right.
you can tell us what's going on.
Yeah, let's get into it. So this is some of the pumpkins I create for seasonal art. All the glass I use starts as clear malt glass. I melt it down, That way I have a rainbow of colors to choose from. I have 10 different colors that I hand mix myself. And so today when Hal came in, or when he filmed this, we were making small stemless wine glasses. So these are all drinkware that we create. We have 6 different styles of glasses. But this glass is a mold blown, and they have little swirls that I call cyclones that you'll see. I do a little pinch and a twist. And that's actually inspired by satellite images of hurricanes. But right now we finished shaping the bottom of the glass. So I'm attaching what's called the puntee so we can break it off the pipe onto this pipe. There's going to be a tiny opening there that I'm going to stretch to the lip of the glass. So I'm just heating that up right now. There's Sky right there. She likes to hang out in the shop in the way. So there we go. There's a tiny little opening. I'm just going to stretch that open with the tools called the jacks. So the hotter I get it, the more I can stretch. And we only have so long to work before it gets too cold and I have to reheat it again. So we get like 30 seconds tops per heat probably before we have to go back and forth. And those are the 2 Joes. It gets confusing at times, and then sometimes it's easy to just call out Joe if you need a hand.
Yeah, so they all show up, right?
Yeah. So I'm just fine tuning it, finishing up the lip, making sure it's nice and straight and round. And then Joe will take it over. So here I'm doing the pinches. So I do a little pinch and twist, and those are what I call the cyclones, which are inspired by satellite images of hurricanes. And I'll heat it up, smooth it all back out, make sure it's nice and even, and then I'm going to start to inflate the bubble and get it ready to go into the mold. So I'm creating what's called a jack line so it'll fit into the mold a little easier. I've gone in the mold, now I'm out flattening the bottom where it'll sit. All our tools are either wood or metal. We have some graphite, but mainly wood or metal. So again, we're just about to break it off that pipe. Joe's gonna tap the pipe, and that little vibration, when it hits the glass, it causes it to crack. And so it breaks it free. So that way we don't need to use any water or anything to break it off. And again, I just gotta aim for that little hole and just stretch it open. So I'm just trying to get a uniform shape and size and see how hot that lip is. It's almost white hot. Yeah, just now I'm making it nice and smooth. And Joe takes it when it's done and he torches the bottom and then stamps it with my logo and my signature.
Oh,
So
check out the
mold.
chart.
So that's the mold. I have to wiggle my foot to tell him to open it. Since I'm blowing constantly, I can't say anything, so I have to use my foot. We use a lot of hand signals and foot signals. Well, only 1 foot signal, but hand signals. So Joe's just letting it cool down while I make the punny. I'm trying to get it as centered as I can right there on the bottom of the glass. That way when I open it, it's nice and even. If it's a little off center, it throws the whole piece off when you're constantly turning. So we try to keep everything as centered as possible. It just makes it all that much easier. And so all my glass starts clear, like I said before. I have over 300 colors to choose from. I have 10 different hand mixed colors that I use myself, that I mix myself, and they each have at least 6 colors. Some of them have up to 12 different colors that I mix together to get these color variations that I use. And a lot of my work is inspired by the tide pools or the ocean. That was always some of my favorite times growing up, was when we spent the summer over at the coast on the beach, hanging out in the water and the sand. And that's where glass comes from, is the sand. So it all comes full circle pretty much. Yeah, it's great.
So now, Cory, I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
First of all, we talked about this a little bit before about how right now, of course, during the pandemic, and since it started at the beginning of this year, a lot of our regular venues as artists were shut down, and a lot of the regular festivals that you do when you took your artwork to places for people to find and to buy are closed as well. And so you've been an entrepreneur yourself to try to make sure that you had festivals of your own in your own place. That's what you're doing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I do normally roughly 20 shows a year, all the way out as far as Colorado, and every one got canceled this year. And all the workshops and classes I offer in my studio, I had to cancel all those as well. So I decided to have a farmer's market pretty much at my studio. And it's all handmade craft, locally grown produce, and different like holistic items and stuff like that. So yeah, I just needed a new venue that was helpful for everyone. So I'm helping the community also make a little money, survive this pandemic as well, allowing other people to showcase what they do and give the community something to come out and do.
That's fantastic. The other question I had, but I don't know if we have enough time to talk about it, but I'll ask you anyway. And then it was just more about how you even got started doing glass. When did you start all of this?
Oh, so that journey, I was going to Fresno State, and I needed an art elective. I earned a degree in business, so I have a degree in business marketing, and I needed that art elective. And I had some friends taking glass blowing, and I kind of seen it before a little bit, so I was kind of interested in it, and I was just hooked the first day. Yeah, the first day I tried it, I knew that's what I wanted to do after that.
Well, it looks like we're about out of time here. Hal, did you want to say some closing remarks?
Yeah, good. If anybody's interested in glassware, they need to go online, take a look, Ballis Glass, or even if you're looking at Ballis Glass through or via Facebook, Cory's really easy. He's very approachable. Cool.
Yeah, thanks, Cory, for being our guest.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yeah,
sure.
Hope to see you guys this weekend. All right.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.